Welcome to the Minnesota Vikings Daily Fantasy Team Preview. I'm Jason Gilbo. With me is Russell Clay. Taking a look at a Vikings team that was pretty simple to figure out last year. Very good defense, a very good running back. The occasional Stephon Diggs week, kind of sprinkled in, and then that was it.
Yeah, well, they just went conservative and went with what worked. Their defense was strong, so they knew they could just run it. We should see similar to last year. I do think they open it up with Teddy Bridgewater a little more, and I do think Jerick McKinnon takes on more of a receiving role. But overall, I think you're going to get more of the same that we've seen from Adrian Peterson's career. When he's in there, going to be 18 to 20 touches a game,
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, you just look at Peterson, 327 rushing attempts last year, nearly 1,500 rushing yards, double-digit touchdowns again. Just a freak athlete that just continues to churn out season after season of elite rushing production. Even though he's starting to kind of creep up in age, he's one of those guys where I don't even worry about him. You plug him in good spots and just don't even worry about it.
Yeah, especially for DFS. If we start to see him do well, I mean, even early on in the year, in good matchups, I mean, we know what we're getting. So the PPR upside is always kind of limited and going to be an issue. But if you think you're going to get 100 yards and a touchdown, I mean, you're throwing him in there.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think FanDuel obviously is where I leaned on Peterson a little heavier just because, as you mentioned, the PPR scoring, given that he was up there near Devonta Freeman, guys who did have a value in the passing game. It was a little bit different from site to site. As far as the rushing schedule, I mean, they have a top 10 schedules kind of set up for them to thrive again and kind of do what they've been doing for the last few years, which is just running the ball and playing good defense. And they're in a division where obviously those games against the Packers are still going to have to put up points. But outside of that, they should be able to just kind of continue to do what they do.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned Stephon Diggs, obviously the breakout rookie season. 700 yards is really good for a rookie, even though 2014 happened. But as far as this offense goes, they drafted Laquan Treadwell. It's just kind of ugly overall, the passing game,
And we should know that you're not a big Treadwell guy.
No, hold on. I am. I was not when he was being compared to Andre Johnson and the elitist prospects of the last 10 years. Then I was not a fan of it. Now, I figured him to be a late first-round guy, like Kenny Britt-ish. Which is a compliment. That's a major compliment as a prospect, not him rolling doobies and getting arrested. Not that Kenny Britt, the one that's super athletic out of Rutgers. But no, I like Treadwell. I think he's going to have, 600 to 800 receiving yards in his rookie year, but I don't think it's going to be all that fantasy relevant for DFS purposes.
Yeah, I don't think so either. I mean, it's really hard to see a team with Adrian Peterson throwing the ball more than the league average. You just don't expect them to see that. And the volume is something that you want, and that's just not there with this Minnesota passing game. And, Diggs was obviously friendly at times last year, but it was really only the stretch over, 4 or 5 weeks or so. And then the rest, it was very mild production. And I do kind of see a similar scenario where that could happen again. He's going to have a couple of weeks where he does put up, maybe 80 yards, 5 receptions, and a touchdown. And then it's going to be, personally, I think a lot of, 3 for 36, 4 for 50, and that's about it.
Right. And again, I think Diggs ends up between 700 and 900 yards this year as well, sort of in that same range, but what does that really get you on a week-to-week basis? That's kind of like Reuben Randall, Marcus Wheaton area. And, I mean, we've just seen what those types of receivers do on a week-to-week basis. It's just really inconsistent. So they're going to be tournament plays in good weeks, but most of the time it's going to be Adrian Peterson. But getting to the running game real quick, Jerick McKinnon, super, super athletic third-round pick from a few years ago. Obviously, the last 2 years has kind of taken on that feature role at the end of the season. where we've seen him go for long touchdowns and be really effective in the receiving game. So I think he's going to have a pretty solidified third down role this year, which is going to be kind of annoying to weeks you have Peterson. I think he's going to be out there on third down a lot, and maybe even out there a little bit when Peterson is on the field, as sort of that maybe split out in the slot like Theo Riddick does. So as far as that goes, injury upside is huge with him. If Peterson gets hurt or is dinged up and doesn't get the full workload, I think McKinnon becomes a very intriguing DFS play.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And to jump back into the passing game real quick, Kyle Rudolph, a kind of a solid red zone tight end. He's just, the problem with him has been staying healthy, and obviously still the volume is the one disappointment with any of these receivers or tight ends. I kind of like Rudolph as a cheap flyer if you were looking to kind of punt tight end on a week-to-week basis. He was never really a guy who stood out. But, I mean, targeted heavily inside the red zone. 21% of the Minnesota targets went to him. Just kind of your average at best tight end situation. Bridgewater has a little bit of a connection with him.
Rudolph is kind of like the McDouble from McDonald's, where you don't tell anyone you eat it, but then you slowly drive up to the drive-thru. You're like, "Can I have one McDouble?" And they're like, "Sir, did you say McDouble?" Yes, I said McDouble. You sneak around, you grab the bag and all the napkins and everything, and there's like cheese falling out on your hand, and you're like, "I don't care." And then you eat it and like really fast. And then like you get a bite, and they're like half a pickle, and it like slides out and hits you, and you're like, "Okay, I gotta go." And then you run home really sad. Yeah, that's Kyle Rudolph in DFS, basically.
It definitely is, and maybe I just have a little bit more love for him because he was an Irish guy. In Minnesota is basically just a professional version of Notre Dame with some of those guys in defense.
I mean, really, yeah. That's what it is.
No,
and it's not that Kyle Rudolph's not talented either. He is. Just like a lot of those Notre Dame guys. He just doesn't have the offense that really works with his receiving skills. He's a very good blocker as well, so that's just kind of what they use him as, you know?
Yeah, I mean, when you're passing, they threw the least amount of passing plays in the league last year. If you're in a situation like that and you're the third target, you're not going to get a lot on a week-to-week basis. So that's the downside with Rudolph. It's just obviously finding those theories and maybe lucking out on those, cheap dump-offs in the red zone if that occurs. That's where Rudolph stands.
Absolutely.
So this defense, a very talented defense. I'm a big fan of Minnesota's defense. I'm going to be using them in and out of cash and GPP lineups for the season. I find myself being very, very timid in playing guys against them just because of the Adrian Peterson run flow and this defense alone.
But who ruined Tevin Coleman's 2015 season? You remember when, I don't know if you remember this because I'm really the Tevin Coleman truther, but there was a game last year where Coleman broke one out versus the Vikings, ran for 45 yards. I think it was Anthony Barr, and he just smacked it out and just took it right back. And it was the most demoralizing moment as a fan I've ever had, because it was like this Tevin Coleman, this Devontae Freeman came out of nowhere, stole our glory, and I was a defeated man, and then Coleman breaks off this amazing run, and I'm all excited, and then just no, but back to the real story here. Yes, Vikings have been a good defense, both against the run and against the pass. I think they're someone to sort of target in terms of using in tournaments and potentially some weeks in cash.
Yeah, definitely. And, I mean, is there anywhere to really exploit with that team? I mean, maybe a secondary piece, but I can't really see any glaring hole that the Minnesota defense has.
Not that I can think of, no. And they even have Trey Waynes as well, who didn't really contribute last year, but he's their sort of first-round corner. And if he can, begin to be relevant and what a first-round pick should be, I mean, that'll be lethal.
Yeah, and I kind of expect a lot of games that kind of go really low as far as over-unders and kind of just a lot of low team totals when teams play the Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
So, That's going to wrap it up with the Minnesota preview. Be sure to check out the rest of our teams at dailyfantasycafe.com.